Good morning, everyone. We are back again at Waikoloa Village. And once again, Kim is nowhere to be found. No, she's busy doing all this other stuff, right?
Not her costumes on.
Probably, yeah. She probably had to change her hair, 10 times a day. No, I'm just kidding. But she's doing something important. But we've got two other important people with us here today. So we've got George Zeeks. He's going to be my co-host today, also a colleague. He's kind of the GOAT around here. I'll leave it at that. And then we've got Gilda Dyckman.
Morning.
Did I say that right?
Yep, Dyckman.
All right, look at that. I got it. The last podcast I did with George, I just started it out like, I'm here by myself. And then I had a guest right there, and George was right here. Because I'm so used to Kim being in this seat, I kind of teeing it up, Right. But give us a little bit about your story and how you got to where we're at now.
So I married into the business. My husband, Michael, had bought his or purchased our business from his parents. So they started back in 78. He purchased it from them in 94. And the secret, he bought it for what they bought it for. So it was a really clean, plus inventory. So no.
Wow.
So that was a really, really good deal. So of course, he goes, all right, I have the money here. And then he's like, and then his parents like, no, we got to, we have to do small payments little payments at a time. So we don't have to pay so much taxes. And we're like, whatever, 25,000, for him, it was, a drop in the bucket. But it started as a little mom and shop pop, a muffler. It was specialized in muffler exhaust work and brakes. And that's pretty much all they did. It was a little shack of a, building that they had. And so when I met Michael, he had just purchased it. And by the time we got married in 96, he had just opened a second location, and it was down the street or down in the next city. So our original shop is in Redondo Beach. So, beach area, in the South Cal. Yeah. And then the other one was in Londo, which was a little lower to middle class, community. And so we can get our Redondo customers to Londo, but we couldn't get the Londo customers to Redondo. They just, no, you're going to be too expensive and stuff like that. And so, but the second location was a full service. It was from Smogs to, A to Z. And, the original shop, which we called the bread and butter, the mom, the one that, made it all was just strictly exhaust and brakes and some suspensions and stuff like that. So he had found an employee, he ran it, and of course when the cat's away, they kind of do a little fudging of the numbers. Yeah. Invoices don't exist, receipts don't get, parts are going through the door, and so sometimes
people just forget. I mean, that's all it is.
Not that they forget, it's like, the manager would be on vacation. It's like, oh yeah, I came in and had everything done. And we're looking for, and back then it was no computers. It was all handwritten, everything stapled on it. And so by the time I got through the door, I had been working in the jewelry industry for 16 years. And so I worked there about 6 months, and I'm like, yeah, I don't like this commute to downtown LA. I don't, and he goes, well, you've been doing it 16 years from the other side of town. You're like, there's no difference in time. I'm like, yeah, but I don't like it anymore, so, and at that time we had, let me go backstory a little bit. So Mike, he rented the property, and the owner was this little old man in his 80s. He'd bought it in the 40s. His property taxes were probably $200 on each property. It was two lots. And so I'm telling Mike, I'm like, why don't you own this property? Because I was with my mom. My mom was the entrepreneur. She loved rental property, houses and apartments. And Mike was on the other end too. He had, property, income property on houses and stuff. So we both had that in common when we met. And so I'm like, why don't you own your business property? I'm like, oh, the man, Cliff Oaks, he doesn't want to sell, and I'm like, well, you got to sell, because as soon as he passes away, his kids are just going to sell it to whoever gives them the highest, the most money. And so, I'm like, well, we have to invite him to our wedding, so I'm like, okay. So, we call him up and, hey, Cliff, are you and, I forgot his wife's name. Are you guys coming to the wedding? We love for you to be, you've been a big part of our lives, and he was like, honey, we're just too old. And they lived in Lompoc Lompoc. I don't know if you guys know what
Yeah.
Lompoc is.
Yeah.
It's right above Solvang, California, up north, like past Santa Barbara, and it's a prison town. You know, it's like a big, yeah.
Well, you've heard of Lompoc.
Yeah, I've heard of the prison.
Yeah, the prison.
I
So
just put two and two together.
yeah,
Finally.
so he lives in Lompoc, you know, and we're like, oh, that's too far, honey, for us to come down. But, you know, as soon as you get back, you know, we'll sending you a gift. And then Mike goes, well, what about selling the property? He goes, well, as soon as you come back from, you know, your honeymoon, you know, give us a call and we'll talk. You know, we're like, oh, okay. And so we had gone to Kauai for our honeymoon, just a couple islands away. And we landed in LAX, you know, and this is like nobody had like cell phones. And we get home, we call him up, we're like, hey, Cliff, we're back. And like, he goes, okay. He goes, well, can you come next Saturday? And I'm like, absolutely. And we're like, okay. And so we go up to Lompoc and you know, and he has like, he was a T-bird man. So he had like two, you know, 55, 56 T-birds in his garage. And his wife collected frogs, ceramic frogs.
Okay, I was about to say frogs.
Glass frogs, plates of frogs, you know, everything's frogs. And so Mike and Cliff, they go to the garage and they get to talk cars, you know, and I wanted to go talk cars and I got to talk frogs for like 2 hours. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
That's
you know,
gotta be fun.
she had the green shag carpet still. And so they negotiated, you know, they're like, okay, they handshake the negotiation price. And we're just stoked, come back home and we're like, oh, this is so perfect, you know? And so at that time I was still working in the jewelry industry. And so about 6 months into it, you know, so we negotiated and we bought the property, but it was funny. It's like, so how much do you want for it? And we're like, okay, well, we'll give you a cash, you know, deposit, you know, and then we'll go from there on what we, you know, do the loan. And he carried us, you know, we want to make sure, he goes, I want to make sure I get the same income that I'm getting from my rents. Mike goes, I'll give you to the penny, you know, so we negotiate that. So anybody knows I'm Colombian, part Mexican, part Colombian. So, you know, it's Christmas time and we get a little Christmas bag, you know, with the tissue paper and we drive to Lompoc with like $250,000 in cash, you know, going up to Lompoc. We're driving and we're excited. This deal's gonna, you know, come and Mike's just driving. We're listening to a song and all of a sudden, and we're like, he gets pulled over speeding because we're like excited. We're just going on the coast, and I'm like, oh my God, we're sitting with this bag full of money, and I'm Colombian. They think we're drug lords or something, and I'm like freaking out. And
we got some mules.
Yeah, right. So so he gives Mike a ticket, and we get to Lompoc, and we give him the deposit, and so we're just excited. A newlywed couple. His dream is coming true, owning the property. Nobody could ever like kick him out of there, and so we're like, okay, this is good. And so, Mike was a tenant on one side and then he had a tenant on, it was like cut in half. And so it was like a front business and a back business. And he was a mechanic as a full service mechanic. So one lease was month to month and the other one had like 6 months to go. And so we evicted him, we got our attorney, we evicted him out. And the guy goes, yeah, sorry, this was supposed to be my property. This is breach of contract from Cliff. And we're like, what? No,
what?
We're the owners. And he goes, yeah, no. He goes, yeah, you'll hear from my attorney. So he sued us as the new owners of the property, and he sued Cliff, this poor old man, for breach of contract because he was supposed to sell it to him. Nothing in writing. There was nothing.
Okay.
It was just a frivolous, lawsuit. He had to hire his attorneys. We had to hire our attorneys. It lasted and then in the meantime, we finally we kicked him out of the back unit, and it's funny because while we were trying to get him out, Mike's conducting business and he would sit in the parking lot because it was a shared parking lot. He'd sit in the chair and every car, and his name was Mike and my husband's name Mike. So Mike was a good Mike and he was a liar Mike because everything out of his mouth was a lie. And so he'd sit in his chair for every car that pulled up and like, oh, I'm looking for Mike. He goes, I'm Mike. And we're like, liar Mike. And so he's like, oh, yeah, I called and talked about, exhaust and da-da-da. You go, oh, yeah, that was me. He'd write them up and the customer would leave. And then all of a sudden, he drive the car across the street to his other shop. It was a little shop across the street.
Oh, wow.
And so we were like, and Mike was like, and he'd see this happening and there's nothing he could do. And all of a sudden the customer would call and say, hey, I dropped my car off a couple hours ago. I haven't heard from you. Mike goes, yeah, you didn't drop it off with me. He goes, no, I dropped off Mike. And he goes, well, there's Mike on the other side and there's Mike, me. And they're like, oh my God. So then here the customer's running out, trying to get his car back. And so that went on for like 6 months. And in the meantime, we're like construction zone. We're like remodeling everything, I'm making it a grand complex, and we're still running the second shop in Lawndale, and we get him out. And it was about a year lawsuit,
Wow.
The guy, he had like this like attorney from like the Yellow Pages, and we had our, our great attorneys, from the beach area, and we had, awesome. And, at the very end, his attorney goes, I can't keep doing this. You're not paying me. I can't do this. So he finally settles and we had our insurance part of it. We had covered part of the lawsuit too. And he ends up walking with like $10,000 of the lawsuit. And, we had like hundreds of thousands of dollars of, legal fees. And we're like, oh my gosh. So yeah, so that was like our first year of marriage, and we're like, I feel like I've been married for 10 years. We're ready. 1 year felt like 10. I'm like, okay, now what else is going to happen? And we had still our rentals. So we had like evictions going on and that. And it was like, it was crazy. I decided I wanted to leave the jewelry industry, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I've been doing this, straight out of, in my early 20s. And so our friend worked for Edelbrock. You guys all remember Edelbrock. They were in Torrance, California at the time. And our good friend was the VP of manufacturing. And so I'm like, hey, is there anything you can do for me? I'm looking for a job. And so he got me into purchasing. So I was doing purchasing for about 6-8 months. And then our property, our remodel was done on the business. And Mike goes, okay, I need you to come and work the show with me, because it was now going to be, we moved both shops into one. And so it was a grand, muffler and automotive repair shop. So that's kind of how we got started on the whole, big center.
That was quite the start.
It was quick. It was like, whirlwind between a lawsuit, a remodel, and, moving the second business to the first business.
Wow.
So yeah, so it was very interesting.
So, because if I understand correctly, you guys just sold the business now, right?
We just sold it July 1st.
Wow.
2024.
So how long did you guys kind of operate together?
Took us about 4 years to have our kids. We have identical twin boys. We only wanted one. We got twins. We got the bonus baby. And then we got the autism 2 years later. So our hands were pretty full. I worked on and off like the first probably up until the kids were like in like late middle school. I would go, I'd do like my 2 days of work, while they were in the school, I'd go in there and like, do all the I did the back end, the bookkeeping, the accounts receivable, payable, payroll, and all that kind of stuff. And, I was like, do 2 days of work, a week's worth and, a day and a half. And so I did that for, until the kids were teenagers, until they, fully went into high school. And when they went into high school, I said, okay, because we had a whole life of like therapy. Our house was like a revolving door with 2 kids on the spectrum. We just, our house just had like, they had each a therapist, and their supervisors would come, their directors would come, and my mom was there. And I mean, my doors were like unlocked, like half the day, because we just had people in and out. So until they got to like high school, and then I was like full time again. But, I always worked the business. I was pretty much working the business. And while Mike worked, he worked in, I worked on, so it was pretty interesting.
So you had a very big part, obviously, in growing the business to where.
Well, absolutely. I just say that, if it wasn't for him marrying me, he probably would still be in that little muffler shop.
Hey, you're not wrong, right? I mean, this is one of the things that we do see is no matter who you are as a business owner, even if this is your first time even purchasing a business or starting in your garage even, it really takes having the right partners. And whether that's your significant other, whether that's the vendors that you partner up with, whether that's just even your employees, they're partners in a sense too.
Yeah.
You have to have the right people to be able to go. It's almost like I don't have any kids. I've got fur babies.
Okay.
I don't have any kids.
They're more work. Sometimes they're a little bit more work.
But what I hear the saying all the time is it takes a village, right? You have to create your village. And this friends are the family you choose, right?
Yep.
So the friends, your partners that you're bringing in, you have to make sure you're selecting the right people.
Absolutely.
Now, with that being said, what do you think, as far as y'all's journey goes, what were those crucial pieces to get you guys to where you're at now?
So first, I mean, biggest part was my mom. I mean,
Okay.
she was home with my kids while I was at work, or I'm a volunteer. I volunteer all the time. So she let me do that while the kids were with their therapist, and so that was the biggest part. But I think Mike knew what he learned. He knew what he knew.
Okay.
Back before ATI, you never talked to your competitors. You didn't know you didn't know what prices were. You just like, yeah, I'll just double it. I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds good, and that I'm making a profit. I'm making money. And he made pretty good money. I mean, for being, the entrepreneur he did very, very well for himself. He was able to, afford a lawsuit, afford a great down payment. He had rental property. I'm like, this guy's pretty good. It's funny. We met in a dating service, and this is before like the .coms. It was like great expectations. You go to a library of binders of people, and their profiles, and you see a VHS, and then that's how you would meet. And I'm like, oh, I like that one. Here's my name, and then they would
Wow.
collaborate. Oh, well, do you want to meet them? Yeah, and they're like, and then they'd exchange phone numbers, and that's how you met.
Dang.
So that's how we met. We don't do the .coms anymore.
Oh, man.
That back then, no.
Wow.
I mean, that was like pre-cell
Hey,
phones
I got
too.
lucky. I met my fiance now in middle school, so
Oh wow!
I
So
got
you had no work.
I've never had to be on any kind of dating app or anything.
Or
Yes.
go to bars and meet. Yeah, no.
None of that.
So that's how we met. But I mean, we do well. It was by ourselves. We didn't have kids for the first 4 years, and then we bought our forever home for now. When we were pregnant,
Yeah.
and so we live in the little small community right next to LAX called El Segundo. So Mike, would keep getting these phone calls from these coaches companies. It's like, oh, come to the boot camps, and Mike's, I know what I'm doing. I'm doing okay. And then so finally, we were this big complex, and it was pre-computers. Everything was handwritten, and then we did actually go to like this, I don't know, the SEMA show in Vegas, and we met this gentleman, and I don't even know if he's still around. It was Auto Genius. It was a DOS program, and it was, that was those were our invoices.
Okay.
There was no like ordering your parts. It was like you still had to do everything by hand. You put it in the thing, and so I mean it worked great. And then so finally we get this phone call from Mike would know, Frank, I think. I think he's still with you guys. I'm not sure, but anyways, he goes, oh, come to a boot camp, and we'll teach you what you don't know. And so we did it, and so I said, Mike, you do whatever you want. We can afford it. You decide. And we were probably pushing. We're probably at the 1 million, and we thought, oh my God, we're like very successful. We're doing with million in sales, 1.1. Okay, not bad, for a mom and pop shop. And Mike's like the cleanest, shop in the South Bay. He'd go around, he had a 409 on one hip and a Simple Green on the other, and they teased us our twins would be born with, little, squirt bottles on their side, I'd come home, he'd come home from work and he's like, hi, what's that spot right there, and so, our shop was always clean and stuff. But
That's great.
Anyway, so we went to our boot camp with ATI, and we joined ATI, and we're like learning what you guys teach us. And I'm like, it's never too late to do it. Do it now. But
It's never too early either.
correct. Yeah. And so we, right at the gate, we just like, oh my God, we've been doing this all wrong. Just part margins, we thought we were making 50% and we weren't, and the labor, margins and stuff. Of course, Kim Hickey was our first coach.
Was she really?
Yeah. So I thought I was going to be with her today. And I'm like, that's what she goes, you have to have a podcast with me before you leave. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, here,
Yeah,
I get you, but
hey,
that's
I'm okay. Okay.
You are. You're cute. You're cute.
I'll take.
You have a better smile,
I don't
so-
want all that.
But-
I used to own a shop right outside of LA too, so in Alhambra.
Yeah, that's where kind of close by where I grew up in Montebello. So, and it was funny, that was the thing, is
Yeah,
like I grew up in Montebello and right next door to East Los Angeles, and
My favorite area.
yeah, best food. But anyways, and so
100%.
Mike lived in Lawndale, and I didn't know where Lawndale was. There was barely when the 105 freeway opened up, and I had this Jewish adopted mom, and I'm like, hey, I met this guy from Lawndale, and I go, where's Lawndale? He goes, Redondo Beach, and I'm like, yeah, no. Manhattan Beach, yeah, no. I go, I'm in Montebello. We have like Bolsa Chica, Sill Beach, Huntington Beach. And she goes, LAX? And I'm like, oh, I know where LAX. We go there like once, twice a year to go pick up family coming in from, our country, and so on vacation. And so then, I get to know him and I'm like, you brought me to the East LA of the South Bay. It is.
It
Yeah.
is. It
And
is.
so, and we're in North Redondo, so it's right
Okay.
next to, it's
Wow.
borderline Lawndale,
Yeah.
but we learned a lot and we wish we had joined ATI 10 years prior. We would have done so much more, but at the final end, at our best year, we were at like $2.8 million in sales. So, we pretty much more than doubled, our sales and, life is great. We got to buy vacation homes and all the fun stuff. Yes.
So what was the hardest? You signed up with ATI, okay? You think you're being successful right now, right? What was that, let's say that first 6 months, that first year, what was the hardest thing that you had to, adjust?
Oh my gosh, I cried every night for like the first month because I was doing all the back end work, entering the portals, doing the classes, but it was also the, all the stuff you have to do, like, how much the load on the techs. I mean, we never broke down workers' comp and all this stuff. And I'm like, where do you get all these numbers? And then, and were we on QuickBooks? I think I was on QuickBooks by then. Yeah, I was. But, we had the easiest kind of booking. It's like, give your bookkeeper, here's all the paper, and here's the reports. But it was crazy. It was just that was the biggest challenge, is just getting it set up. But once it's set up, it's like, okay, we're good.
So when you got it set up and now this data is starting to come out, what's that feel like?
It was, our eyes just like lit up. We were like, gosh, we were doing this all wrong, and the great thing about it was that we didn't have resources. It was the Yellow Pages. I think it was Google by then. I'm not sure. But, it was talking to your vendors and, you got what you got, but with having ATI, we had every resource from employees to management to successorship, and just everything in between. And it was like, it just felt like you had your own library, in your back pocket, so.
If I could ask one more
Yeah,
question.
of course.
Absolutely.
So, there's way too many owners of all types of small businesses and they're silos. They're out there by themselves and maybe they know a couple people or maybe they don't want to talk to their competition or maybe they don't trust people and they're living lives alone. We see that husband and wife teams are very successful because you have a partner.
Right.
But sometimes, like you said, you did jewelry for a while.
Yeah.
And so you want to talk about your day, he wants to talk about his day, but you really want to talk to each other. Yeah. So once you get in and now you've got a coach, what's that like to have someone who's going to talk to you every week and they're there to support you or smack you with a stick or, what's that transition like from going from not having that to having that?
I mean, it was hard. It was hard because they were making you work and making you work, do things that, out of your comfort zone, but then realizing at the end of the day or the end of the week, at the end of the month, you're progressing, you're building a better business and you were starting to shine outside of who you were. The community got to know who we were, our neighbors got to know who we were. And it opened up the way we just market ourselves, and it changed our whole perspective on our business. And we weren't afraid to call our competitor down the street, like, hey, what's going on? And, are you having problems with this? Are you having problems with that? And then when COVID came, we were like in front of that 8 ball in every community, unless it was an ATI, we knew, you guys were doing podcast every single day, Ingles every 9 o'clock, podcast for 6 o'clock in the morning for us, West Coast. But people were like stuck. They were frozen. Like, what do we do next? What do we do? And we were ahead of the ball. We were calling other shops. I'm like, hey, I have some hand sanitizer. I have some stuff that I got from, the group that we belong to, and they're giving free, hand sanitizer. And they're like, oh, thanks. They call me. So it was like, we were their go-to people, because we knew what to do. Yeah. And they were like, I don't know what to do.
What is that saying? The rising tide
raises all ships,
right? and I think this is one of the testaments to not just ATI. This is for any kind of coaching company.
Absolutely.
No matter what kind of business you're in, there's always a resource like that available. Yes, you have to pay for it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it raises all ships, right?
Right.
One thing I did want to mention is you guys were pretty successful. Don't get me wrong, before joining ATI. And I see this happen a lot. People find success because that's the success that they didn't have before.
Right.
And they're like, okay, we're doing great, or we're doing good enough.
Yeah, we thought we were doing great.
Exactly.
You know?
But you don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's very hard. And I know you mentioned this a couple times, competitors and all of that. I don't think that any business, especially in the States, has any competition. There's no competition. We have peers.
There's so many cars on the street.
Yeah. I mean, they're all peers of ours.
Yeah.
And especially, I think COVID really highlighted this for a lot of small business in America,
Absolutely.
where people rallied together. And even like in LA, I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay.
I moved to LA. Like I opened up my shop. That's why I moved there. Like I didn't live in LA before I opened up my shop. So
Wow.
I secured my lease on the phone
Wow.
before I moved out there. So my first trip out there was moving there.
Wow.
So when I did that, I get there and I'm just driving around. There's like a shop at every corner.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. And then on top of that, now I'm looking at food. So I was in Alhambra and there's a lot of
It's Asian community.
So I love ramen. There's a ramen shop like every 2 doors down. There's
and China, and then a Chinese in between that, and
Korean fusion food. And it just got me thinking. I'm like, how are all of these shops in business? And the rent is not cheap.
Right.
So how are they all in business? But this is where we really have to look. If you provide that kind of service value, any kind of value to your customer, it doesn't matter. You're going to do just fine.
Yeah.
And then you get the resources you need, the partners that I was mentioning to really help elevate that. So with that being said, I know you guys partner with ATI and, a lot of stuff, you guys start implementing a lot of these changes and whatnot. But now that you've sold the business, what was that like? I would say like that last period right before you guys sold. Like, what did you guys do to kind of set that up?
wow. So I mean, we had our team of people, which was first was our coach from ATI. It was our attorney. It was our financial person. It was our bookkeeper or our accountant, and our close friends that were in business for themselves or had was a CPA, and just. We had a really tight core, and we pretty much kept it a secret from our employees. We didn't let our employees know. We chose to do that because the way that our industry right now is, it's so hard to find techs. And so, finding good management and stuff like that, we didn't want to rock the boat. And we kind of had it in our agreement with the buyer that, we'd keep it, hush, hush. And then at the very end, right before asking, like, well, can we sit down with them? And I'm like, nope. And it was funny. It was like, you fire him the day you give him the key and he hires them the same moment. And our employees were shocked. They were like, it was like, keep a secret. Between the two of us. And it was funny. It's like, as it was going on, our numbers were going a little down. We were our car count was going down. Our sales were kind of going down. And we're like, and then, we get a phone call from our broker, who is one of your vendors, is ATI vendors.
Okay.
And Joe would call me and he was like, so your general ledger last month was looking a little low. And I'm like, yeah, I know you're going to call me. And it's like, this could like break the deal. And I'm like, so every time he called, I'm like, well, this is it. We're hiring. We don't want to just hire anybody. We want to hire good people and not have you get stuck with bad people. And so he understood, and I was like, we're crossing our fingers the whole moment. And it was a long period. It was 5 years in the making, planning what we were doing, how we were envisioning it, what we were going to do. We are going to sell the land and the business. And that was that's how we were first selling the whole package. And then ended up, we only sold the business. So we kept the land. Yeah, it was great. It was very nervous, and it took, up to, Kim would say, okay, Mike, here's your homework you need to do. If you want to sell, you need to start giving up, this kind of stuff. I don't want you to work in the business so much. I want you to work on the business with Gilda. And that was hard. That was a hard one to get away from him. But, it was that and making sure the numbers were good. We never, I did a panel for ATI's super conference, and it was like, keep your foot on the pedal, don't let up, keep going, don't think it's for sale It's an escrow, oh, we're fine, No, I mean, it was like, we were like, come on, guys, we got to keep the sales up. We got to, so, and he's like, he can pull out of the deal in 24 hours. And I'm like, okay. And so, so until he signs on that paper and the 3 days of right of rescission, all that kind of stuff, it took us from 5 years to, the process. We started in October of 23. The first offer fell through. And then by January, so he found like a buyer within like 2 weeks. And we're like, what? 2 weeks? And we're like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
Really unusual.
Especially in that area.
yeah,
too.
it was really crazy. And then are like, wow. I'm like, this is really happening. And he had said, it takes about 6 months. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then it fell through. I'm like, okay. And our vision was Mike would be out by the time he was 65, and he was going to be 65 in the end of 24. So yeah.
It worked out.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it did. I mean, a little early, but it was okay. We had told our employees, yeah, Mike's going to retire in 25, and if we still own it, I'll run it until I'm, 65 or whatever. And so that was their kind of the vision. They knew we were kind of almost out the door. So then that first deal, fell through, and then in January, Mike's like, yeah, this is not going to work. I go like, because we were giving up a lot selling it as a package. We thought it was going to be the best deal, but after we looked at it, we were probably getting about 500,000 less for the business than we were getting selling it by itself.
Right.
So, which crazy, right? Because we already had in our mind, this is what the business is worth, because we use the ATI, 2.5%, 3%, and then and property. And then by the time we got the offer, I'm like, wow, they shaved off a lot, and so, and we justified it off of the business. And we're like, yeah. So Mike goes, yeah, that's not going to work for us. And I was away on a business trip, and he made the decision without me. And I'm like, and I was having those butterflies, not the love butterflies. It's like the nervous butterflies, and it's funny, when the first offer came, I was like, oh, okay, we're going to do this. And I was excited. And, we signed it. And Mike, he sat there and he went in his chair and he started crying. I go, why are you crying? I go, are those happy tears? He goes, they're happy tears. But I mean, he'd been working it for 45 years. I mean, that was his day in, day out for 45 years. Same lunch every day, for 45 years,
Routine.
Same drive, same routine. And I just said, you should be proud. You started this business with your parents. His dad never welded. His dad sat in a stool all day long, drinking his beer, watching his son make the money. I said, you started this from ground zero for your parents. I go, you should be proud what you did for your family's name. Unfortunately, we couldn't carry it on to our kids because our kids are special needs, and that's why we sold it. We would have loved to kept it going in the family, but it didn't work out for us on that way. But that deal, went south, and then they saw the numbers were not looking good, and we're like, okay, well, what it is what it is, So within 1st of January, he found the second buyer, and that's who ended up. And he actually was going to bid for the first time around, and he had a tragedy in his family, and then he goes, well, if they're only selling the business, I can do this. And if they have, a vision of selling the property, then I'm in. So, and we said, yeah, you can have an option to buy it. So
Awesome.
yeah. So
You guys got that orchestrated really well.
yeah, but it from January to July 1st. So that's how long it took the paperwork.
6 months.
The back and forth. And that's where the attorneys go, first the letter of intent, which, okay, four tries on our side, 4 tries on their time. I'm like, okay, now we come to a deal. And then it's the escrow papers, and then it's, changing all the agreements. And then that went about 4 times each side. I'm like, oh my gosh, so yeah. And then when you own the land, and then you got to negotiate the lease. And so that went 4 times. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So it was crazy, but
A lot of paperwork. And this is, once again, a partner, right? You found a partner that helped out.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be ATI, but we do have Auto Center Sales is one of the partners here.
That's who it was. It was Joe from Auto Center.
Awesome, right?
Yeah.
So when you have somebody in your corner that knows the field, and we talk about this a lot with marketing, you could do marketing by yourself, but if you have somebody that understands the full realm of this, it helps navigate that process.
Yeah.
So one thing I do want to make sure the viewers at home, if you guys have a business or whatever that case might be, or you're looking to buy a business, you really want to think about all the stuff that goes into it. It's not something that's just quick and easy.
Right.
There's a lot of paperwork involved. Obviously, there's a lot of vetting that you have to do to figure that out. But for the business owners that are looking to retire at some point, succession planning you could start succession planning from day one of opening your
Oh,
business.
absolutely.
You know, it's
Absolutely.
you don't need to wait until okay, I'm ready to sell now. No, you should be succession planning the whole time.
It's all about the vision
Yeah.
Yeah.
of what's the final journey.
Yeah.
And I really do think that the 5 years that it took you to go through that, if it would have happened in 6 months,
Yeah.
if that would have happened, would you have mentally been ready to not be the owner? You know,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you're losing a piece. When we were
Right.
talking with Mike even earlier,
Yeah.
he still got that owner's
Oh,
head.
absolutely. He does.
Yeah.
He does.
I mean, you basically, this is like your employees are like your family.
Yeah.
And you just sold them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you,
Yeah.
so what was that like? If you would have done it in 6 months versus 5 years, would that have been harder mentally for you?
Probably, I would say it probably would have been easier because you know I didn't I mean maybe because I married into the business, so I didn't have that connection of
Okay.
starting it, and it was my legacy, because I had my own thing. It was hard. I mean, I think for me it probably would have been easier because we would have been younger and we maybe started a different career, But now that we were at our final years, it was tough for Michael. I mean, it was really tough for him. But I was already out the door like 2 years prior. I was ready. I was
You're ready to
done.
go to
I
Hawaii.
was done. Yeah. But it's hard. I mean, making the changeover from being a day-to-day business owner to retired. I mean, life changes.
So give me an example of that. What's different now? Like, what is something that you guys feel like you can do now that you weren't doing before?
We were working out together every
Okay.
day, and it's funny. It's like, so my kids, they're working. They're having the best life ever. They're starting the retirement at 24, not after we're gone. Because they're special needs, so we're giving them the experience of life while we're retired. And Mike's like, okay, boys, I know you guys walk every day for exercise. Let's all walk together. And like, Dad, that's our thing. You got to start your own thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like, and he goes, okay, well, can I come with you once in a while? So, they do their walks together once in a while, but it's so funny that, they already have their set retirement, that's kind of like their life, there's just getting off and having their little jobs and stuff. But for us, it's get up, we have our morning routines, we work out, Mike takes, knickknacks around the house, and it's like, okay, it's been 8 months. And he goes, the first 2 months he was done on all the house things, and I'm like, okay, that's good. But, I'm a volunteer, so I volunteer all the time. So I have my slew of my friends that I do things with, are volunteers. And, it was funny because I'm a Rotarian. And so I was president the same year we retired. So my presidency ended June 30th. And we sold the business July 1st. So in 2 days, I lost the two things that kept me busy. And so I'm like, okay, it's like, so, first day of retirement, I'm like, okay, what do I do? I'm not the president anymore, and it's like, I'm not the vice president, I lost both my titles. And so I took a 1-year gap, and I'm going to be the president again for Rotary in July 1st.
Hey,
They're like,
you took that 1-year gap, though.
yeah. And they're like, well, because nobody wants to do it. They're all older. I'm one of the younger members. And they're like, but we had so much fun with you, Gilda. You have to bring it back. We're falling apart. And I'm
There we
like,
go.
okay, if you need me that bad. No.
Uh-huh. Oh.
But I love volunteering because, they did so much for my kids while growing up with their special needs. And it's like just my part of giving back to the community and stuff. And I'm going to look for more things. I'm like, right now, it's my first year. I'm trying to wet my feet, and what I want to do. And then probably look into more things and,
What
take
has
some
Mike
classes.
supplemented his time with?
He's working out. And actually, the set. And so this is one thing. So it was the week before we closed escrow, and he's like, yeah, I got something in my eye. He's like, he's rubbing his eye, and he goes, look in my eye, and I'm like, I can't see. There's nothing in your eye, because he's a welder, so once in a while maybe a little, splat goes in the eye, and I'm like, well, go to urgent care, and they'll probably take it out. You probably have a little piece of metal in there, and he goes, all right. So he goes, nothing. I'm like, okay, So then he goes, yeah. He goes, my eye's getting blurry. So we go out to dinner with some friends, and my friend goes, I had a detached retina. You should probably go, to the doctor because it's really serious, right? And he goes, yeah, it's been going on for like 2-3 weeks. I mean, if something really would be going on, So I'm like, Mike, let's go to urgent care. Go to urgent care. It's like 4:00 in the afternoon. Go down the street, and thank God it was an empty urgent care. And
That never happened.
yeah, and it was a brand new facility, and so and so it's down the street from our house, and like, yeah, there's something going on in your eye, I put a call into the retina specialist because we have PPO, and they're like she's gonna stay open for you, and we're like,
Wow.
okay, like, well, it's 4:20. You need to go because she closes at 5, but she said she'll wait for you. And so like we're driving in traffic and we get a phone call from and like, where are you? And like, we're like 10 minutes away. We're getting there. And so we get there and, I'm sitting in the waiting room and I'm like, I go into the examining room. I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, you need to get him to the ER like right away. I'm like, what? And he goes, there's some pressure behind his eye. And, he's lost 80% of his vision. We don't know what's going on. Go to the ER. And it was funny. I was in Rotary that day. It was a Thursday, and our guest speaker was the foundation of the hospital. And I know her from our community.
Yeah.
And she said, in our hospital, 36 minutes, and you're seen by a doctor at least. And I'm like, so we get to the ER, and I'm like, 36 minutes. And
Or my pizzas.
and I was supposed to go out happy hour with another Rotarian, and she's at the foundation of the college, and she knew the foundation of the hospital as well. And I get a call from Heidi, like, hey, I'm calling Susan, and blah, 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 So I go, Mike, I'm so hungry. I'm gonna go get some snacks. We're gonna be here for a while. By the time I got from the gift shop around the corner, the doctorate came out, evaluate him in the lobby, and was getting they didn't put him in the bed because I had all of the referrals from the doctor. They had to do an MRI, want to make sure there was no like tumor on his, his retina or his eye. And so it ended up, he had a stroke in his eye and he lost 80% of his vision. And it's like a shower curtain is over his eye in dark. And so they're like, some people get their vision back within 6 months. And so he didn't get it back. You never know what life's going to give you, and so that was like the first week of like our retirement, going through doctors and finding out this was happening. And then it was actually also like the week of the escrow. And we have on the corner of our shop, everybody gets hit. Their cars get hit. So, four-way stop, not four-way, but signals, and, bikers get hit on the bike, pedestrians get hit, all of a sudden. So we're like, oh, we got to take the kids down the street for an interview for their work. And so we get in the car. It's like 1:00 in the afternoon.
No.
We get hit. And we're like, we've been here 45 years and we get hit right in the corner of our business. And so it's like, okay, I think it was time. I think it was time for us to retire. So, everything fell in place. But, Mike lost his vision, most of his vision in one eye. So I do most of the driving at night. He gets to drive in the day. But so you never know, life changes from one day to another, but we're enjoying it.
There we go.
We're having fun.
Well,
Yeah.
one thing that I really want to mention, I know I talked about this before, but like you said, life changes at any given moment.
Yep.
And we have to be prepared as much as we can be.
Yep.
So succession planning, right? I mean, this is one of the things. Make sure we are doing this from day one, as soon. Obviously, there's a priority list. I'm not saying it doesn't have to go all the way to the top of your priority list on day one, but it should be on that list.
I mean, you have to make sure you have like your trust for your personal family. You have that done, and we had that pretty much done before before ATI. But the business part, because the business isn't part of your like your family trust. It's not even in the trust, but you have to have that all spelled out. Who's all your, your board members, your minutes, your, who percentages, who employees are going to get it or family's going to get it. You have to have it spelled out because, I mean, flying here to Hawaii for this conference, you're with most of your family. The four of us came together. What happened if something happened, You just don't know. You have to be prepared,
You got to fly on 4 separate flights.
I mean, hey, the volcano erupted here at the Super Conference 25. So we could have been running to the beach, we didn't know. And, they're like, eruption view here. And I'm like, and people were like lining up to look at it. I'm like, what happened if this was the eruption of 74, And so I'm like, I'm not going to do that, but that was funny.
Well, on that note, we had a volcano erupt during Super Conference. That's one of the highlights here as well, right? I mean, it's been a pleasure having you here. Your story is amazing.
Thank you.
I'm sure a lot of the viewers got at least something out of it.
Yeah.
And if you didn't, I mean, succession planning, you just heard towards the tail end of this. I mean, there's so much stuff, so many things that can happen without, really predicting it.
Yeah.
And you have to be ready for as much as you can be. So
enjoy your work days and think of the end of the rainbow, because retirement is an awesome thing. And thanks to ATI, we are living the best life ever.
Nice.
I don't even have anything else to say to that.
No, I have nothing. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Any final thoughts from you, George?
I just loved hearing your story.
Thank
and,
you.
And the fact that it took, because sometimes people say, "Oh, it's we want to sell," and then it took you 5 years, right? And you didn't give up, and you got exactly what you wanted, and that's a success in itself.
Yep.
Good for you.
Yeah, just be organized and keep everything in order. And it was easy as peasy as I thought. It was easier than I thought, so between having ATI and having the resources that you give and working with our coaches and working with our 20 group people for advice, that was a lot of big advice that we got too from our 20 groups. And so it all fell in, and it was easy as pie.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you in the next one.
Thank you.